Belgium might know have co-sponsored legislation to deregulate alternative fuels. So that's a lot of the I want to tell you a little story about that while I have just a minute. There's Steve Sukup in the back of the room. And if you've ever driven around rural Iowa, you'll probably see big grain bins that say Sukup on the side of them. That's Sukup Manufacturing. And when Senator Paul first came to Iowa, he said, let's talk about ethanol. He said, I'm not a supporter of government mandates, but he said there's got to be a way that we can be supportive of alternative fuels with less government. And so he said to Steve Sukup, is anybody here a Star Trek fan?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, all right. So it's the whole and of course we know James P. Kirk is from right down the road here, Riverside, Iowa. So it's like when James P. Kirk got into the academy or out of the academy, he had to take the test and nobody had ever beaten the test before, but he found a third way, right? So Senator Paul said, we got to find a third way. There are those who support the mandate, like Hillary Clinton came out today and said, hey, I'm all for it. There are those who say, no, I'm not going to help ethanol, I'm not going to help ethanol alternative fuels because I don't support mandates. But then Senator Paul said, what if we look at deregulating government, deregulating alternative fuels, and figuring out a way? So he went to work with Senator Grassley. They got their best people on it. Steve Sukup was a part of that process, and they came up with joint legislation between Senator Grassley and Senator Paul to actually help grow ethanol through government deregulation. How is that for alternative thinking and the way we need to think? So now that I've killed 5 minutes, let me introduce. I'm Steve Grubbs. I'm working for the campaign. I also have Dave Fisher right here, the state co-chair, and thanks to our team who helped put this together. Thank you most of all for coming out in the middle of the day on Thursday. Let me introduce to you. This is the 6th presidential campaign I've worked on, and I've loved everybody I've worked for. But I have never met anybody in politics who just says, look, this is what I believe. It may be popular, it might be unpopular, but I'm going to tell you what I really believe. And that is so refreshing to know that what you're going to hear from Senator Paul, a lot of you may disagree with parts of what he says, but the bottom line is he's not going to take a poll, he's not going to read it and say, oh, this week we should be saying this. You're going to hear exactly what he believes, and that's really refreshing in politics today. So with no further ado, Senator Rand Paul.
Has everybody got a comfortable seat? Yeah. I can go on for a while.
We heard that.
My voice is still a little raspy. Just last week I went on for 10 and a half hours. Because I think the Bill of Rights is important. Yeah. I think it's important enough to delay Congress's vacation. It also annoyed me a little bit that what we were going to talk about they'd known about for 4 years. It had been coming up. It had a date certain that was going to expire. And then why did they want to wait till the very end? Because they want to crunch it and they want everybody to be anxious to leave town. They want no debate. They just want to keep doing what they're doing. What they've been doing is collecting all of your phone records all the time. Not an individual's phone records, not John Doe's phone records, not somebody who they have suspicion, not somebody who they have probable cause they've committed a crime. Just everybody. This is what our founding fathers fought the revolution of. John Adams said that James Otis's fight against general warrants that were not specific, John Adams said that this fight was the spark that led to the revolution. What our founding fathers were upset about was that the king was letting soldiers write warrants and go in anyone's house. It was a generalized warrant. Why? Because they wanted to see if your papers had been stamped with the stamp tax. When you read about our history, they say they hated the stamp tax. They hated it because they didn't get to vote on it. It was voted on in England, so they didn't feel like they had a say in their government. What they particularly hated was soldiers coming into their house with a warrant that didn't have their name on it. There had been no suspicion and not going to a judge. So we fast forward to today's times. We had a terrible attack on 9/11. We should punish those who attack us. We should keep them from attacking us. We should protect America. But can you have your liberty and have security also? Franklin said that those who give up their liberty in exchange for security may wind up with neither. That can happen. The people who love the government program, they say, well, the government's not abusing it. I say, yet. There have been times in our history when we did things, when we generalized, when we didn't make a specific accusation, when we said, everybody whose parents were from Japan, every Japanese American in California is going to be rounded up and put in a prison. We did that. That was wrong. We've now kind of admitted it was wrong. People say, we'll never do that again. The president says, I'm a good man. I wouldn't do that. The problem is what Madison said about government is that if government were comprised of angels, we wouldn't have to worry about the law. But since government is not often comprised of angels, you do worry about the law. And if you look at the history of even our country, the greatest, freest country, there have been times when we let our guard down and did things we shouldn't have done. Rounding up the Japanese Americans in World War II is one. Lack of jurisprudence, lack of due process for African Americans in the South was another. Spying on civil rights leaders was another. Spying on Vietnam protesters was another. The thing is, you have to be careful about allowing too much power to gravitate to one body of people or one person. Lincoln wrote that any man can stand adversity, but if you want to challenge a man, give him power. I think that's where we fail. We've let too much power gravitate to the presidency, too much power gravitate away from the states and the people to Washington, and there's always the danger that that power will be abused. Some say, well, there's no evidence the government's abusing all these records. Do you know what they can determine from your phone records? 2 students at Stanford did a voluntary app on a phone and asked a bunch of kids just to volunteer for it, and they wanted to determine what they could tell by who you call and the length of phone calls. 85% of the time they could tell what your religion was. Nearly 100% of the time they could tell who your doctor was. If your doctor was a rheumatologist, they can guess what your disease is. If your doctor's an infectious disease doctor, they might well be able to guess what you're going to your doctor for. So there's all kinds of things you can tell about people. The people on the other side of this argument say that the Fourth Amendment, the right to have only an individualized warrant, doesn't apply to your records. I disagree. That's where the battle is going on. Think about your credit card record. People on the other side of this say, oh, it's just boring old records. Who cares whether the government sees your credit card your record? If you have nothing to fear, you have nothing to hide. Sort of a little different than innocent until proven guilty. But the thing is, if I have your credit card bill, I can tell whether you drink, whether you smoke, whether you gamble. I can tell what magazines or books you read. I can tell who your doctors are. I can probably tell who what medications you take. The government shouldn't collect this information. And then you might say to yourself, well, what about those terrorists? How are we going to catch terrorists? I'm not against looking at the records of people if you identify them. Put a name on a warrant. Talk to a judge and say, we have suspicious that John Doe is a terrorist. I'm not against collecting information. I'm against the general collection of information when there is no suspicion. And for all practical purposes, it turns out it's not working very well either. I think it's unconstitutional. The Second Appeals Court, the court just below the Supreme Court, ruled last week that it's illegal. So I think there's a strong argument that it's unconstitutional. The court has declared it illegal. And now last week, the Department of Justice investigated the program, and they say not one case has been cracked by it. So it's unconstitutional, illegal, and doesn't work. I said we ought to end it, and I'm going to work to end it this weekend. I started out, and really most of my career was spent as a physician. Still am a physician. I still operate and do some surgery around Kentucky and some internationally. And when I decided to run for office, people said, well, why would you give up on a profession that is almost universally respected to go into a profession that's sort of exotic? And I tell tell people I got tired of throwing things at my TV. Really, it wasn't so much unhappiness with Democrats. It was actually unhappiness with Republicans. It said they were going to help, said they were going to do something better, and then turned out to be no better than the Democrats. I was unhappy that under Republicans, the deficit doubled. Now, under Democrats, it's worse. Well, we didn't do a very good job when we were in charge either. I was unhappy that under Republicans, we bailed out all the banks. I don't understand why a guy making $100 billion in New York every year runs his bank into bankruptcy, and then asks all of us here in what they call flyover America to pay for some bankers' mistakes. We should have never bailed them out, but it was the Republicans and the Democrats got together and bailed them all out. I think there's no reason we should send educational responsibility to Washington. I think it ought to be done here locally. If you don't like your curriculum, you go down to your school board member and you unelect them. But you have influence over your local politics. You have almost no influence in Washington. And there's almost no objective evidence that education's gotten any better. You talk to teachers and you say, well, teachers are Democrats. You know what I tell every teacher? Sending the power, your power, to Washington to judge whether you're a good or bad teacher, not one person in Washington knows whether you're a good or bad teacher. So that control should come back to the states. It should come back to the localities. When I talk about No Child Left Behind, and how that sent too much power to Washington, almost every teacher will say, you're right. But you know what we need to do as Republicans? We need to talk to teachers. We need to go out and talk to people that aren't going to vote Republican and say, this is why you should, because we want to empower teachers to have more power in the classroom, principals to have more power, local school boards, parents to have more power. The bottom line is that we want to win again. We want to be a national party that can win Iowa again. Iowa, the last two times around, everybody says, oh, it's just about the Republican primary. Well, it is to begin with, but it's ultimately about who can beat Hillary Clinton in the fall. It's about winning the general election as much as it is winning the primary. The primary is to sort out who can win in the fall. One of the good things we have going for us is Quinnipiac came out with a national poll yesterday, and in that poll, I was one of only 2 Republicans that is ahead of Clinton nationally. When you look at it state by state, I think we're the only Republican beating Clinton in Colorado, Iowa, Pennsylvania, and New Hampshire. All 4 states won by won by Obama. And you ask yourself, well, why is that so? People say, and other Republicans are saying, he's different. He's different, watch out, he's different. Well, yeah, different in a good way. The good way is that we're attracting independent voters. I'm guessing there might be a few independent voters in the room. That's how you win elections. You got to get a lot of Republicans, but you got to start to get independents if you want to win general elections. There are many issues that I think reach beyond just where we are. We are a great party in the sense that we've been really good and vocal for like the Second Amendment. And I'm a defender of the Second Amendment. It's meant much more than any Republican. But we haven't been so good with the rest of the amendments. What I want to make us into is the party of the entire Bill of Rights. The Fourth Amendment is your right to privacy. It's what we talked about, individualized warrants. Justice Brandeis said that the right to be left alone is the most cherished of rights. But there are other amendments in the Bill of Rights. The Fifth and Sixth Amendment, I think, are about justice. They're about due process. The Fifth Amendment says the government can't take the property without compensation. Anybody remember the Kelo case? It was a case over in New England where the government came to a neighborhood, called it blighted, even though the people living there liked their homes and didn't think it was blighted, took the neighborhood, condemned it, and gave it to a big company. That should never happen in our country. That's un-American. It's antithetical to the American dream, that your property could be taken without compensation. Your property is also being taken through regulation. They come onto your property and they can say, well, you can't drain the water off here because your farm is a wetlands. Ridiculous things like that. Or your backyard, that sometimes there's a puddle in your backyard is now wetlands. The government yesterday just passed a new rule saying that every bit of land in the country that could somehow conceivably be connected to a river is under the jurisdiction of the federal government. They have one rule, this all comes from, none of this is passed by your Congress. They have one rule called the migratory bird rule. That means if a bird could conceivably have been on the Great Lakes and somehow is now on your property, you are part of the Great Lakes. I know it sounds absurd, but that's this connection. They call it a nexus to the navigable waters. It's all about the government taking something well-intended and really, really messing it up. The Clean Water Act says that you can't discharge pollutants into a navigable stream. We're all conservative, we're libertarian here. None of us probably thinks any company should be allowed to dump benzene in the river, right? So that's a reasonable thing. But over the last 40 years, they took something reasonable, and now they define dirt as a pollutant, and they define your backyard as a navigable stream. Ken Lucas got 10 years in prison for putting dirt on his own land. John Potsguy was a Hungarian immigrant. He got 3 years in prison, $200,000 fine, bankrupted. He was a guy who came to our country fleeing communism, coming for freedom. He loved America, and then we destroyed it. Our government is literally out of control. President Obama has added 25 million words of regulations with the EPA. Some of it's our fault, though. We gave too much power to the presidency, even Republicans. When Republicans are in power, there's a Republican president. We give up too much power to the presidency. We say, do whatever you want. And when a Democrat's in power, they say, give up all the power to the presidency, and the presidency gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't write most of the laws. Most of the people from Kentucky that come up to see me, they've got a complaint, and I'll say, I have never had a vote on that. The rule you're talking about was written by an unelected bureaucrat who I can't get rid of and you can't get rid of. So really the biggest problem we face in our country is a collapse of the separation of powers. Our founding fathers were incredibly prescient about this. They were like, we would have this balance. And Madison said that there would be ambition pitted against ambition. The ambition of Congress to keep its power would be pitted against the president to take the power, and vice versa. Somewhere along the way it broke down, and all of the power is going to the presidency. So it isn't just about how bad President Obama is, although we could list the ways. It's about power, letting too much power gravitate to the presidency. What I want to do is figure out how we become a party of the entire Bill of Rights. The Sixth Amendment says that you have a right to a trial by jury, a speedy trial by jury. In 2011, we passed a law that says that an American citizen, any one of you, could be arrested and detained without a trial. And I was in the middle of this debate with a prominent Republican senator, who won't name any names, from Arizona. And I looked at him and I said, does this mean you would send an American citizen to Guantanamo Bay without a trial, without a lawyer? And he said, yeah, if they're dangerous. So, well, it kind of begs the question, doesn't it? Who gets to decide who's dangerous and who's not? Richard Jewell was the guy everybody said was the Olympic bomber. You remember him? He wasn't the Olympic bomber. He fit the profile, though. He wore glasses. He was introverted. He had a backpack on. He looked suspicious. The TV, everybody said he did it. Turns out he didn't do it. That's why we have trials. That's why we don't have indefinite detention. Imagine if Richard Jewell had been a black man in the South. What would have happened to him? This is why we have due process. This is why you get a lawyer, to prevent bias from entering into it. It's why you want a judge to sign a warrant before they come in your house, because the judge is supposed to be dispassionate, and if for some reason the policeman or woman has bias built up into them, they're angry at you because they don't like you, if they call somebody who doesn't know you, you get permission. So it's this balance, this check and balance. I'll give you one final example of how I think we ought to be the party of the entire Bill of Rights. There was a young black kid in the Bronx, Khalif Browder. He was accused of a crime. I don't know if he committed the crime or not. He was 16. He was put in Rikers Island, and he was kept there for 3 years. He was kept in solitary confinement, and he tried to commit suicide several times. The Sixth Amendment says you get a speedy trial. You're supposed to get a lawyer. You're supposed to go to court. You probably wouldn't let any of your kids spend overnight in Rikers Island if you could get them out. But he was born, he had no money. So realize why some people are unhappy in our country is they don't think they're being treated fairly. We've got to protect the whole Bill of Rights. And if we want to be the dominant party, if the Republican Party wants to be big enough to win Iowa and everywhere, we need to be the party that cares about the Sixth Amendment as much as we care about the Second Amendment. When that happens, we're going to dominate. I want to be part of that, and I hope you do too. Thank you very much.
We're going to do, where's our Muscatine radio station? Oh, we're going to do an interview right out here, and then if you have just a minute, I want to talk to you real quick. Test. So, we're putting together a campaign. Doug Bricker, thanks for being a part of that campaign. And thanks to some of you in this room for being a part of that campaign. What we want to ask you to do is this. I know we're Iowans, we're going through this caucus process, and we like to look at all the candidates and spend some time studying and evaluating. And I appreciate that. But some of you are the type of people who want to be a part of a campaign from the very beginning. You want to be on the team from the first quarter to the fourth quarter. And if that's you, we want to ask you today, before you leave this room, to sign up and join our effort. And you'll see around the room we have guys with iPads here. And if you'll just grab one of them, it'll take less than 2 minutes to give us your name, your email address, then we'll start contacting you. And in that, by doing so, we will be able to have a record of you and organize and get you involved in the campaign from here in the first quarter. Because Rand Paul is about much more than just a campaign. It's a movement. Not just a movement in the Republican Party, but it's a movement in America. A movement towards more freedom, more liberty. It's about the Bill of Rights, and it's a whole different way of thinking about politics. It's worth it to say today, I'm going to get involved, I'm going to be a part of this team. So with that, we want to thank you for coming out, thank you for getting the books, and thank you for being a part of this team. Appreciate it.